Okay, so now we're in front of the speaker again. I hope you can see it clearly. It doesn't look very clear on my little camera screen here. I'm going to remove the protective grille. This keeps little fingers away from it, although I haven't got any little fingers to keep away from it, but let's see if I can do this. That's it. That's it. That's coming away. And I'm going to show you the drivers in a pair of speakers. So here we're starting with this little one down here. Right, this is called a tweeter, okay, and it handles the high frequencies in a typical speaker. This is a mid-range driver. Now in a small pair of speakers, such as a stand mount pair of speakers, that might be all that you have. Usually the tweeter sits on top here, and this drive here in a stand mount speaker will handle bass frequencies and mid-range frequencies, i.e. very, very low notes and medium notes, and this one will handle the very high notes. However, because this is a floor stander, it has got an extra bass driver. Now the bass drivers on this one are at the side, but that is not a typical arrangement. All speaker brands will try and do something that's slightly out of the ordinary to give them a unique selling point, and this one is that the bass driver's on the side up here. And I suppose that the advantage is that because they're all closely knit together, rather than having a bass driver down here somewhere, is that it's a more sort of tightly focused sound. And there's like a smoother transition between bass and mid and treble frequencies, because one thing that you ought to do when you're testing out speakers is to get up and move around, because if the sound changes sorry, if the sound changes as you move around, then that might not be something that you want to live with in your house, because you might want to be in different places in your listening room, whatever, and still have a fairly coherent sound wherever you are in the room. Okay, so that is your driver setup. With this particular pair of speakers, because the bass drivers are on the side, if you swap the speakers round, you can change the bass sort of behaviour in your room, because all rooms will at some point resonate with very low notes and very low frequencies. And I suppose the bulk of this video is really going to be about how to stop that happening. Alright, so with the bass ports here facing inwards, what that's doing is keeping them from pointing at the corners and other bookshelfy things in my room, and that would set up a bass trap and it would honk. Okay, so that's why they're pointing inwards like this. But if you didn't have the corners so close, you might want to have the bass ones pointing the other way, so you'd have to swap the speakers round. Okay, now we have down here, this is quite important. Typically, the average loudspeaker has what we call a bass port down the bottom here, which also goes to reinforce bass frequencies. Some don't. Those are called infinite baffle speakers, the ones that don't, but they tend to be slightly weaker in the bass anyway. This reinforces the bass. Now some speakers have their port facing forwards, like this one is facing forwards towards me. Okay, some of them have them on the back of the speaker. Now, if they have them on the back of the speaker, that means that your speaker has to be positioned further away from the wall. Otherwise, again, you'll get a bass trap. The bass notes will bounce off the back of the wall, and it will reinforce the sound unnaturally, and it will sound quite uncomfortable. So that's basically the inner workings of a speaker. The rule of thumb is that your speakers should be firing down the long. I point my rather untidy room. See, there's the speaker, and this is the long wall, and they should be pointing down there, firing down that way, and that should be, for a speaker this size, that should be between 14 and 20 feet long. Anything smaller than 14 feet is counted in hi-fi terms as a small room, and would probably only need a stand mount loudspeaker with one mid-range and bass driver and one tweeter to fill it. Okay, that would need then, from your amplifier, that would need an amplifier that was reasonably powerful. I would say probably between 50 and 100 watts per channel, in order to drive those speakers, because the smaller speakers tend to be less sensitive. If you remember them from my part 3 video, that 90 decibels is round about the very sensitive mark. So anything, you know, in the early 80s in terms of decibels is not going to be particularly sensitive, needs a more powerful amplifier in order to drive it well. But that should fill a small room quite amply with sound, and you know, you don't need to worry about it being overly loud and worrying about the neighbours. You've got the volume control. Unfortunately, with loudness ward CDs, you haven't got as much control over the volume as you think. But I mean, you can still, with these things, you can still turn them down. You'd be surprised. I mean, even a speaker like this, although it's quite loud, because it's well suited to the room, it doesn't. It really doesn't sort of resonate and annoy other people in other rooms in the house. Okay, so with a medium room such as this room that I'm in now, between 14 and 20 feet, you would need a speaker such as this with, you know, one bass driver, tweeter and a mid-range driver, and that should stop unwanted resonances. If I got any bigger speakers than this, then this room would boom quite horribly. As rooms get bigger than 20 feet, then bass resonance doesn't become an issue, and really the sky is the limit in terms of, you know, the weird and wonderful arrangements of speaker drivers that you can have, because some speakers have, you know, 2 or 3 bass drivers and 2 mid-range drivers and all sorts of funny little arrangements there, which quite unnecessary really for this room. Okay, so there is basically my guide to speakers, other than to say that for these larger speakers here, your amplifier can be slightly less powerful, because these speakers tend to be more sensitive, but as always, amp and speaker combinations do sound different, and so you need to obviously hear them. Okay, the speaker is really what you hear. Okay, so it should, number one, be able to sort of reflect accurately what's going into it from your source component, but also it should sound agreeable, and it's the one thing that really is worth taking the time over to listen to before you buy it. Okay, alright, I need to stop there as I'm again reaching my 10 minutes. Bye.